It's back Porch Sports, presented by Duck Club Bourbon. Money, more than anything else now, drives the train in college athletics, specifically football. Some of the bigger pieces of news that we had in the offseason, and it's a 365-day cycle with news in college football. Jersey patch sales. We're getting a lot of litigation. Monster selling the naming rights for Complete Sports. My mind is blown by that. And, of course, the arms race between the Big Ten and the Southeastern Conference with regards to revenue. Who's getting the most revenue? Who's allocating the most revenue to its membership? It's a lot to keep up with. What's next? That's the big question. We're going to ask our guest, and he has an interesting background. This is one of the more interesting backgrounds we've had. He's the author of a book called Agent Confidential. You can follow him on X at Jimmy Sexton. I love that, Mike Chaudron. I think that's absolutely fantastic. But before we get into the details of your book, and I ask you your take regarding some of the bigger things or events or engines powering college athletics right now, you're not a former agent. You're not a former coach. You're just a guy who ended up figuring out the world of college athletics from the money side, the business side, and you have a pretty good take on it all. Kind of give us the quick elevator pitch about your background.
So very good. So Scott, really nice to be here. Thanks for having me. So I have a parallel path. I have 40 years experience in business, including some private equity experience. So I have good business experience, but then I started helping out some coaches at East Tennessee State University a long time ago, walk the sidelines, help some of them that didn't have representation. So I took my business experience and then what I learned walking the sidelines and being behind the scenes in meetings and helping coaches a little bit and just put it all together to put together Agent Confidential. So kind of a parallel path of business and a love of college football.
So what did you learn?
Yeah. So what what's interesting is what I learned is what the public sees is usually not what's really happening behind the curtain. So for example, like with coaching searches, the public sees the last 10%. 90% is done before the public even knows there is a search because the ADs are talking to agents and, hey, what would it take? And they all have the list, in the left-hand drawer that they hope they don't have to open, but they know what the numbers would take on that particular list. So it's just what we see and love is just different when you pull the curtain back. And once you pull the curtain back, you won't look at it the same way again, but we still love it. But it's just very different because it's very much a business nowadays.
That's a really good point because I try to keep my personal allegiances to myself, but there's a team I grew up adoring and they could walk on water. But once I got older and I start to actually know some of the people who were involved with the program, you meet some coaches, you meet some athletes, you hear some stories. It really drives home that old adage, man, don't meet your heroes. It kind of takes a little bit of bloom off the rose.
Yeah, it really does. And one of the stories I tell in the book is in 1992, I was in the banking business in Mississippi, and I was down at a little small branch. And the loan officer called me in his office one day, and he showed me a loan document for a Chevy Cavalier for a local lawyer. And I'm thinking, the lawyer must not be doing very well. And he said, it's not for the lawyer. It's for that power forward down at the high school that's going to unnamed SEC school to play basketball. The money was changing hands then too. It's just out in public now. So very much a business, but just that's an example I use of pulling the curtain back and seeing what a lot of times has already been out. It was out there for a long time.
Well, what do you want people to extrapolate from this book? I mean, obviously your personal story is something else that you've been able to marry the two together, your business background and your love of college athletics. But it takes a little something more to write a book. And you're not going to write the next Gone with the Wind. You're not going to write the next Godfather. No. You're in a nice spot in East Tennessee in your little cabin by the lake, I'm sure, and you're happy as can be. But you're not going to make a fortune on the book, but you still want to move books because you want to teach people a lesson. What are you wanting to teach people?
So what I'm wanting to teach them is that again, to look behind the curtain as to what's really happening. College football is a massive business. We think of it as rivalry and pageantry and all that, and it's still there, but it's still a multi-billion-dollar business. And one of the points I make in the book is that college football is probably the only billion-dollar business where you can't you don't know who the CEO is. Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to point out. So I'm trying to help help people see coaching searches, how we got here. I talk about how we started with big buyouts with Gus Malzahn, how we got to the point we are now, how coaching searches happen, and then we have a chapter 24 called "Follow the Money," which is about private equity and their influence in the game. So that's the main thing. I just want them to see the business behind the sport we love.
Can't see the CEO. I wrote down that line. I think that is absolutely brilliant. And even if we were to get the one thing we need the most, a commissioner, he or she is still not going to be the CEO.
Yeah.
The money's going to be going all over the places, and there's still going to be multiple. Even though that person would presumably have unilateral power,
Right.
There's going to be a lot of people with a lot to say.
There are, and that's when you look at private equity. I was asked the other day on another show, tell me about private equity. I said, private equity isn't bad. Private equity isn't evil. They're not good. They're in it for the money, and they are here to stay. And that's what we're seeing out there now. So be it the jersey patches, be it the media deals, the difference between the Big 12, the Big 10 and the SEC on revenue, it's all there. But man, we're talking a $15 billion a year business, and that's what it is.
Joined by Mike Chaudron, Agent Confidential. That's the book. You can follow him on X at Jimmy Sexton. I love that handle. That's a really good handle. You're talking about private equity, and that's kind of a dirty word, a dirty phrase in college athletics. But as you said, it's not going anywhere. It's here to stay. But the thing about private equity is those people want a return on their investment. Those aren't boosters donating to build a new library to put up another wing on the east side of the stadium. They want to get their money back.
Yeah.
How do schools balance that, putting in a return, but at the same time saying, hey, we will take your money because we have to have it?
That's a great question. And I think that's what's still trying to be figured out right now, because if you look at private equity in the private sector, they come in and take equity stakes. Well, you can't come in and take an equity stake at a good old state university, right? You can't do that. So what they're looking for is to loan money, and the pot at the end of the rainbow, the pot of gold, are media rights. That's what they're looking at. So if you look at what, for example, what Redbird Capital in the Big 12 did earlier this summer, Redbird came in, was going to offer $10 million $30 million per school, 10% interest, but they wanted a cut of the media rights. That's why the schools didn't just jump on it. And the other piece of that is Redbird Capital owns Paramount. Paramount owns a big piece of CBS, thus another media angle to offset the Big Ten with Fox and the SEC with ESPN. So it's just interesting to see all the moving parts. But private equity is here to stay, Scott.
Does Brett Yormark, and Monster Energy deal aside, $20 million to be the sponsor of men's basketball, women's basketball, and football, and when you figure it out, that comes out to a little over $1 million per school. That's chump change, all things considered. Yeah. Well, that you consider that Notre Dame's getting between 18 and 20 million for SoFi, I think.
Yeah.
Wow.
Financial.
So, but all things considered, though, other than that deal, would you say a Brett Yormark at the Big 12 is ahead of the curve when it comes to these sorts of arrangements? Or Mike, before you answer, is it only because the Big 12 has been first, and maybe the likes of a Greg Sankey or even a Tony Petitti might actually have their ducks more in a row because they are working behind the scenes, and what they are going to unveil, if they unveil something, might be more robust and more sensible?
Yeah, I think that Tony Petit, I thought that Brett Yormark at the Big 12 was just trying to get out in front of it and try to create, to manage his league. And I give him credit because that's, if you look at the revenue difference between the ACC, the Big 12, and the Big 10 and the SEC, last year, the ACC gave $47 million per school. The Big 12 gave just under $30 million per school. The Big 10, almost 80 million, and the SEC 72 million. So even though we talk about the revenue gap between the Big 10 and the SEC, the big gap is between those top two and the next two. So I think that's where Brett Yormark was just trying to be proactive and make some things happen in the best interest of his conference.
Well, and I've said this, anytime you're the first in something, you're setting the market, you're putting yourself at risk. More than likely, you're going to not get quite as much value, which they got exponentially less value. But we'll litigate that another time, Mike. You talk about the gap between 1 and 2, between the Big Ten and the Southeastern Conference. When does that gap close? Will it close? Is it only going to get wider? Is it all dependent upon the next round of TV contracts?
Well, I think it's going to continue to widen. I'm by no means an expert in this, but I think ultimately you're looking at the big two at some point pulling away, whatever that looks like, with the super conference type of thing. So I think that the gap is going to continue to widen. But if you look at the Protect College Sports Act, remember the Ashley, is it Moody, the senator from Florida, at the very last minute put that thing in there about, okay, you got 180 days to move conferences without the 5 years. So that was the Florida State Miami amendment essentially. And if you think of the utter chaos that will create in the middle of football season,
Yeah.
if this thing actually happens, is just crazy. So, the interesting thing about now you've got the AFL-CIO, weighing in on it. You've got the Black Congressional Conference. You've got all these amendments. The bottom line is every one of these special interests wants to put their page in the rule book book, and it's going to be very difficult for it to pass in the context that it is right now. And that's when I think we're looking at maybe the plan B, whatever that might be, that Sankey is talking about and potentially breaking away. But September is going to be a really interesting month to see what happens with this potential legislation.
My concern is this, and we've been around the block for a number of years, both in sports and in real life.
Yep.
And people get excited about something at the beginning. Protect College Sports Act. Oh man, we're going to make it happen.
Yeah.
Well, when something sits on the shelf for a little while, it's kind of like a toy. When you was a kid, you forget about it. It's not quite as appealing. You find something else. And Mike, we could have any number of things happen over the next month to take away from this thing, getting the attention it needs. We've got a war going on. We've got an economy that's got some problems. We just picked a new attorney general. My concern is this, that I don't see this happening for 6 months, a year. I mean, when do you expect it to come to life, if it ever does?
When it first came about with the president's memo in April, I point blank said, folks, we're looking at a midterm election year and nothing's going to get done in 2026. And that was just my guess. I do have a degree in political science from the University of Alabama, which doesn't qualify me to do anything, but I'm pretty good around election time. And but I said, there's no way they're going to get the 60 votes to prevent a filibuster and get this thing through. And now at the last minute, you've got all these factors weighing in and coming in. Again, AFL-CIO, Black Congressional Conference, that Florida timing amendment. It's just not going to happen, I don't think. And and I think that Cody Campbell is in Ted Cruz's ear. I think he has as much to do with the writing of this bill as anybody. So that's just a really interesting thing. But don't underestimate the power of the Big Ten and the SEC, because they were just kind of hands off, and then suddenly a week and a half or so ago they came out and said, "Okay, we're in." Boy, that was negotiating power. If you remember what Tony Petitti said at Big Ten Media Days when he got to the podium, he said, "Well, I talked to Greg Sankey 5 times this morning before breakfast." And then they're not talking about the weather, Scott. They're negotiating legislation with Capitol Hill and Ted Cruz said game changer, getting them on board. So it's still going to be very interesting to see what happens with that legislation. But I'm with you. I don't think anything happens very soon.
Yeah, to your point, the Protect College Sports Act, it grew from 110 pages to 170 pages once Sankey and Petitti decided they were going to have a text message thread about it over breakfast. Think about that. Mike, before I let you go, and the book, again, is Agent Confidential. You can get that anywhere you can get a book. I saw it on Amazon. I'm downloading it tonight, I promise you. But you've already got a follow-up book in the works. Can you give us the synopsis? Don't tell us, because I know we're supposed to buy it and read it. Just give us the synopsis.
So it'll be what the premise of the next book will be really what's next. What does the future look like? In the final chapter of the book of this book, I lay out the way where I think this is going, and it will be a continuation of that. But I feel like there's a lot of good learning in this book. Again, it's on Amazon, it's Kindle, and then I did the Audible myself. Which was very difficult, but a lot of fun. So if you don't mind a South Alabama accent, you can spend 4 hours letting me read it to you.
Well, you see, that's exactly the kind I want, though. I want to be able to sit on my porch and just let Mike read his book to me. I'm down. There you go. Mike.
Yeah, it was fun.
How difficult was that, though?
It was very difficult. I got the book published in I'm trying to think, late March, and it took me about 6 weeks to get the audible done. I did it here in the studio in my office, and it was just very, very difficult. You send it in, and then they would say, "Oh, well, you got this decibel wrong." So it was. I almost gave up 2 or 3 times, but I thought we need to stay at it. So finally did it. So I think I'm a little better at it, but it was really difficult to get the audible done myself instead of paying somebody to read it.
The name of the book is Agent Confidential. You can get it on Amazon, the X account, Twitter. It's Faux Jimmy Sexton. One more time. I love it. His name is Mike Chaudron. Mike, you are the man, brother. I appreciate you joining us this morning.
It's been my pleasure, Scott. I really enjoyed it. Hope to talk to you again during the season. A lot will be going on.
All right, you the man. That's Mike Chaudron, author of Agent Confidential, joining us on the Duncan Williams Asset Management Hotline. Stick around. It's Back Porch Sports, presented by Duck Club Bourbon.